This guy is the former talk show host on KGO Radio. He's also a lecturer and presidential historian. How about it for John Rothmann? Boy, if a time needed your analysis and a period of American history, it is this one. As Kim said, two smack-talking candidates for president. They will now debate. I don't know if there's much of an exchange of an idea with debates. It seems more of a TV show than anything else. But they have taken the audience out, John, in this particular iteration of presidential debates. And perhaps in so doing, maybe some of that stuff that just makes it kind of more a wrestling event than a debate, some of that stuff may be removed. Your thoughts on that? And then I want to get to this new poll and the Manhattan trial and a lot more.
First, I'm going to be with you on June 3rd. You just tell me the time, and I will be present.
I love that. Love that.
There was no audience in the Dewey-Stassen debate in 1948. There was no audience for the Nixon-Kennedy debate in 1960. There was no audience for the Ford-Carter debate, at least some of them, in 1976. Traditionally, there are not audiences. So this is a good thing. I'm glad it's going to take place in June, early enough before early voting and before the conventions. And then in the beginning of September, I think it's September 10th, again, we have that opportunity. What is interesting is that they are bypassing the old presidential debate format, which is a good thing, I think. This easily is done by networks. And so we now know that CNN will host the first one on in June, the 27th, and that the second one will be hosted by ABC. I'm happy. Let's see what the format is. Let's see who the moderator is. I was thinking about Mark Thompson, of course, is the perfect moderator.
Well, John, you say that facetiously, but between the two of us, only one of us has actually moderated a presidential debate, and it's not you. It's me. Thank you very much. And you may say, well, Mark, what do you mean? You haven't moderated a presidential debate. Yes, I have. And Albert, maybe you can scramble my debate. I hadn't planned on this, but before the end of our time with John, I will share with you my moments actually moderating. And I was the sole moderator, John, at a presidential debate.
I'm very impressed. Which one was it?
All right. It was in an episode of 24, everybody. So, yes. But it was the best episode of 24. Thank you. Thank you. All right, here is the situation with the latest polling. As you know, there is a polling of all sorts. There's polling that shows Trump ahead in swing states among likely voters. A lot of the polling was done with those with cell phones and computers, so you can't say, they were a bunch of old people who just have their landline like us. No, they're people across a pretty strong demographic, representational demographic. And among young people, you saw that Trump leads in some of these swing state votes. And again, as reflected in the polling now, and you can also say that's early in the polling process and too early to really measure the temperature of the water. But before you weigh in on that, I'd like to just share this with you. And I say that because we kind of talked about it a couple of days ago when the polling information first came out. I still want your thought on it, but 17% of voters blame Biden for the end of Roe v. Wade. A new poll shows how even as abortion is mobilizing Democrats, there is confusion over the issue of Roe v. Wade. 1 in 5 voters in battleground states say that President Biden is responsible for ending the constitutional right to abortion. This is despite the fact that he supports abortion rights, and it was Donald Trump that appointed the 3 Supreme Court justices who made it possible to overturn Roe. Your thoughts?
Don't confuse people with the facts. What I think is going to happen is that in the campaign, the lines will be drawn clearly. There'll be a lot of clarification. Any poll this early, I'm skeptical of naturally. And so I do believe that we have the Trump trials to go through. Particularly the one that's taking place right now. We have a whole host of issues which are going to evolve. You have the decision by the Trump administration to give $2 billion in aid to Ukraine. and $1 billion in aid to Israel. We have the continuing ongoing crisis at the border. There's so many variables here. And we don't know who Donald Trump's going to take as his vice president. Of course, they all had their tryouts at the courthouse yesterday. And I found that, by the way, you know what I'm reminded of? I don't know if you remember the play and novel, The Devil and Daniel Webster, where
Sure.
an individual sells his soul for his future. And these theoretical vice presidential nominees just sold their soul. It was one of the most disgraceful things I've ever seen. And I agree with Liz Cheney. Absolutely appalling.
And I wonder if you agree with me. They have a finish line they're trying to reach. They have a power that they're trying to achieve. They have different goals than Trump has, but Trump may be the horse that they can hitch their wagons to get
That's
them
exactly
to that
right.
place.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
So tell me about this case in New York. I mean, again, if it goes for Trump in the way of a mistrial or whatever, it won't be tried again. I mean, if it went 11-1 on a mistrial, John, it's likely they'll retry it, but probably not in time for it to matter in the election.
That's correct.
Yeah. And yet, if it goes against Trump, if he's found guilty of the felony, I mean, how does that affect the election? Does it?
Well, Trump voters are saying they don't care. And of course, when you have members of the United States Senate, members of the House of Representatives, when you have potential nominees for vice president, all saying that this is a persecution, not a prosecution, and I would suggest to you that a lot of people believe it. And that is what is so sad. If Donald Trump is convicted on this, will it hurt him substantially? I don't know. But I can tell you, most interesting election result was in Indiana, where 22% of Indiana Republicans voted for Nikki Haley, who's not even a candidate these days. The Republican Party has a problem. And so when I hear about polls or I hear about this trial, the one thought that I have is the American people in the end will be the judge. And I think that's a good thing because I think American people have pretty good sense.
Oh, please, John, don't pander like that. The American people do not have very good sense.
You bet I am.
Oh, my God. Look at 2016. The American people have very good sense. The American people have no sense, and most of them don't know what the F is going on in their country.
I beg your pardon. Let me remind you that Donald Trump lost the popular vote. The electoral vote, of course, is what matters. And that's why what you're going to see are the candidates for president really concentrating on the states with electoral votes, the sure things. But you know what? It's not a question of pandering. I really do believe the American people have good sense. You may not, but I do.
Well, I also feel as though, John, you have trust in many of the American institutions that I feel are flawed.
No, it's okay to say they're flawed, but do you trust their fundamental integrity? That's the question. For instance, look at Clarence Thomas. Is there a more conflicted justice on the United States Supreme Court? And certainly what he's doing is an abuse of power.
I come from regular stock.
Well, you know, the thing is, John, that's an American institution, the Supreme Court. So you're telling me you don't trust it now.
American institutions are perfect, but you can say that they work. Fundamentally, America, look, during Watergate, the press worked, the Congress worked, the special prosecutor's office worked, and in the end, even the American presidency worked. So I do have faith. I have to have faith, otherwise I couldn't live here.
I mean, I understand having optimism, but I also think a healthy amount of skepticism might be part of it. Randy says, good sense. Does that include all the Sanders supporters who voted for Trump in 2016? Unless
no, hold on. You can't generalize. You have to talk about the fact we have a lot of voters who, frankly, do not measure up. But I believe the majority of the American people try to do the right thing. Now,
I agree with that, John. I mean, I agree. I have faith in humanity in the sense that I connect with other people who are citizens of this nation. But on this point, this is an interesting one because those are people who are trying to do the right thing too, right? Those Sanders supporters. Why do you suppose they were so troubled by Hillary Clinton that they would vote for Trump in 2016?
They were angry. They were angry at being excluded. But I have to tell you, when you look at the hard numbers, The simple fact is that look what the American people have done in the states dealing with the question of women's right to choose. States like Kansas, where you would have thought that position would have been eliminated. No, they upheld the right. So I believe not that every election turns out the way I want it, not even that every candidate that I support wins, but that on balance, things work here. That's why you feel safe in your home, despite a middle of the night police call. By the way, we call them? We call them egg beaters, because if you remember the old egg beater, when that helicopter went up, that's what it sounded like. An egg
Oh,
beater.
sure. Wow.
But I'm only suggesting to you that we have a long way to go. Let me point out on the debates. Remember that Nixon was presumed to be the man who would win the debates against John Kennedy. He came in a gray suit, having lost a lot of weight, having banged his knee, and he lost not on substance, but on appearance. Let me remind you that Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter squared off. Gerald Ford simply made a mistake. He said Russia didn't dominate Eastern Europe. Remember Mike Dukakis on the question of the raping of Kitty Dukakis, if it had happened, and he opposed the death penalty? There are errors, but then again, you have one-liners like Ronald Reagan's line, "Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?" What happens in these debates is mistakes are made. When you judge a winner or a loser in a presidential or vice presidential debate, the basic way you do it is by the mistake they make. Let me tell you, between now and November 5th, there are going to be a lot of mistakes.
Just to follow up on this, because this is a part of things today also. On 2016, Brian is saying they believe the propaganda. I got bombarded with the anti-Hillary crap. There is a propaganda machine now, so well developed, so beautifully targeted to those independent voters and to those that are viewed as vulnerable based on Google searches, YouTube searches, et cetera, John. You know, they can sector these people in ways that they couldn't historically. There is a lot of misinformation out there.
That's what the Russians did in 2016. The Russian interference in the election, and we played those recordings on the air on KGO, those targeted to convince voters and it was all put up by the Russians. You're right. If you ask me about artificial intelligence, that's going to be a major issue in this campaign that no one is even thinking about really or talking about. Getting the truth out, or at least facts out. And by the way, I listen to all sorts of media. I listen to some people on Fox who wouldn't know the truth if it slammed them in the face.
The situation internationally is troubling. You know, first of all, you can take a jetliner view of the situation internationally, and you can see that strong men are on the rise. Democracy is on the decline in general. And the Slovakian prime minister, this Robert Fico,
Yes.
He is someone fighting for his life right now. I mean, I think he took multiple bullets, and they're quite worried that he is going to die. They arrested this suspect right after the shooting, but I always worry, John, that we are just a destabilizing event away from there being real a kind of an amplification of some of the problems that we have internationally already.
You're absolutely right. Security for presidential and vice presidential candidates is going to be very important. And there's no doubt the Secret Service is doing its best to ramp up, as they always do. But I go back to 1968 and the variables. Some of us are old enough to remember 68, when the Tet Offensive took place, when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, when Bobby Kennedy was killed, when the country seemed to be coming apart at the seams. And my point is, we have to do everything we can to inform the electorate, let people know what's going on, and hopefully people will make the right choices, whatever those choices are. I was very interested yesterday when the question of a cult around Donald Trump came up. And frankly, that is exactly what it was called yesterday. It's a cult around Trump. It's very hard to break. And we have to do everything we can, not to convince everyone, but to convince a majority of people. And I think that's going to be the key. And by the way, those 22% of Republicans in Indiana who didn't vote for Trump and voted for Nikki Haley, they're the ones who are on the fence. They're the ones who are going to make a difference in the election. So I'm very interested. I'm not yet prepared to call the election one way or the other, but I am prepared to say that all of the mistakes and the positives and international events are going to come together. Look, Biden not only just proposed a $2 billion aid package for Ukraine, he proposed a $1 billion aid package for Israel. He is pursuing tariffs against the Chinese, and people don't understand the huge impact that will have on the American economy as well. There are a host of variables here. By the way, I did not mention the issue of global warming. And I know you're going to do an environmental segment, but we have just had in April the hottest month in recorded history. And people do not or are not aware of the impact globally, because in places where the heat is rising and where water is scarce and food is scarce, we're heading for an explosion internationally in which we are going to play a central role, but where we may find ourselves subject to all kinds of attack.
Well, that's a multifaceted point you just made. I would say two things. One is the American electorate, sadly, doesn't care about climate. They don't care about the climate crisis. I mean,
not yet.
Yeah, not yet. And that's a...
By the way, you heard what happened here in Northern California in Sausalito, where they're now saying Sausalito is subject to landslides, which is true, and also the whole port area may be subject to the rising sea levels. So community by community by community, we are going to be impacted. And hopefully, it's like Vietnam War. You remember it was when Walter Cronkite got on TV every night and talked about what the casualties were, that people finally understood the impact of the war in Vietnam. I think the same thing applies to weather.
Yeah, the same thing applies, but it's a far less rapidly developing story. I mean, community by community, you're right. But I mean, San Francisco has to build a whole seawall because of it. Let's face it. I mean, it's not I think it's indisputably the case. I'm just suggesting that when people talk about those things that they're going to vote on that make their list of political priorities, sadly, climate crisis doesn't make it. And in fact, we'll have to see. I think so much of this, John, is affected by media, by messaging. In a way, we in the media dictate a lot of what's on people's minds. So as in the 2016 election, since we're talking about that, the media couldn't let go of the email thing. And that became a front and center issue for so many people. I mean, it was really a concocted political weapon that was weaponized to the very end. I fear that the media focuses on the horse race and they focus on those things that make good copy instead of those things that are really important.
Of course, that's what the media does. And that is their job. Their job is to earn ratings, and they go to whatever issue causes ratings. So I'm in complete agreement with you on that. But I'm only saying if you or I were chosen to moderate a presidential debate, one of the issues we would put at the top of the list is what do we do about global warming? And by the way, there may be nothing we can do except build dikes and accept the fact that heat is going to be a serious problem. By the way, I live on a hill in San Francisco, and I laughingly said to my wife the other day, who knows, before you know it, we may have beachfront property.
Yeah, I mean, things are changing quickly, that's for sure. You mentioned San Francisco. Give me a minute on what's happening with the mayoral race in San Francisco. Who's going to run San Francisco?
Well, it's interesting. The proposition for a stronger mayor was taken off the ballot. They're not going to put it on the ballot. But you
explain what that would have done.
It would have strengthened the ability of the mayor on appointing officers, appointing police, appointing commissions, the whole nine yards. I'm intensely involved in what's going on here in San Francisco. And let me just say, the voters are going to have a very interesting choice. But we have a system in San Francisco called ranked choice voting, which means there is no runoff. And you're looking now at the graphic. Thanks for putting it up, Albert. You have London Breed, who is the incumbent, Daniel Lurie, who has never held a political office, and who is a nonprofit guru, if you will. You have Mark Farrell, who is the former mayor of San Francisco, who is going to run a very, very good race. You have Aaron Peskin, who is the leader of the Progressives, who is now president of the Board of Supervisors. You have another candidate who is listed here, but who is not making a dent in the polls, to be very honest with you. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Safai has no real traction. He's running because he's term limited, and there's nothing else for him to do. At least that's my best guess. When you put him on a spectrum, Safai is to the left. Breed has been on the left, but is now running to the center. Aaron Peskin runs to the left. Mark Farrell runs to the center. And Daniel Lurie seems to be trying to occupy a centrist position as well. It's going to be an interesting and exciting contest. And because of ranked choice voting, I can't predict who will win.
Well, only one of them.
Choices. You have 10 choices now. It's just appalling.
Yeah, the ranked choice voting is something that is the wild card in San Francisco. John is so right to speak to it. Only one of them has been on this show.
Mark Farrell.
That's right. And for that reason, this show...
Go ahead.
We're going to throw our support behind him, John. He's been the only one who's been on.
I will tell him I'm going to see him in a few hours. I was with him the other night as well. He is gathering the support of most of the moderates in San Francisco. And it's going to be a real battle. Mark would tell you, if he were here, that he expects that he will certainly be top 1 or 2. But because of ranked choice voting, and I'm going to do a program on the Voice of San Francisco, I just found out this morning they want me to explain ranked choice voting, and I will do my best to do that, and we'll talk about that as time moves on.
Yeah, that's, as you say, it's critical, right?
May I also point out quickly, the San Francisco School District is in terrible financial trouble. They no longer control their own hiring and firing. It's been taken over by the state. And if they don't get their fiscal house in order, the San Francisco Unified School District is going to be in big trouble. And the superintendent and the school board want to put on the ballot on November 5th a bond measure for $185 million. And I can tell you that that bond measure will not pass under current circumstance.
You can find him on his podcast. His daily podcast is Around the Political World with John Rothmann.
And may I point out the Voice of San Francisco, which we are also doing now. If you go to the Voice of San Francisco, the podcast, I do 10 minutes every single day on a San Francisco issue, just as I do for the Around the Political World with John Rothmann.
Look at you, John Rothmann. You do Around the Political World with John Rothmann. You also do the Voice of San Francisco with John Rothmann. My God, you're very busy, John.
Yeah, but you know what's sad? I know we got to close. What's sad is that there is no talk radio in San Francisco, so there is no interactive ability. And I want to plug what you're doing, and I will participate on May 3rd, June 3rd, and I will be there with you for some of the time, as much as you want, because that kind of interaction is so vital. So if you have not yet made your reservation for June the 3rd with Mark Thompson, join us and we'll be happy to see you all.
It is the June Swoon event. We'll mention it again before the end of the show, but John, we always love seeing you. Oh, there it is. Albert always hustling it in time. The June Swoon event is June 3rd, and John Rothmann has now committed to being there for a part of it. Again, this is a virtual meetup. You never need to leave your home or wherever you are. 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific time. First 25 people will lock spots. We only have a handful of spots left, so grab it now. Sign up at our PayPal, $50 donation to the show. You'll lock up a spot, and then note with your donation, Meetup or June Swoon. And you can also RSVP to say, hey, I just hit the PayPal, mtsmeetup@gmail.com. And the PayPal is underneath all of our videos, so you can just click on that and make contributions.
Before I go, I just want to remind people, do contribute to the Mark Thompson program. The reason this exists is because it's supported by you, by all of us. So I urge people, if they have not yet signed up for the meet and greet, but if you can't get into the meet and greet, you can certainly give to the Mark Thompson program, and they'll put that up so you know where to send a contribution.
Yeah, thank you so much. We are Patreon and PayPal dependent. You're so cool to realize that. Yeah, we're really audience supported. So I thank you for being so aware of that and reminding us and the audience of it.
And
always.
I'll see you next Wednesday for sure.
Looking forward to it, sir. And we'll listen to you in all the places you can be heard. John Rothmann, everybody. Thanks, John. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.